At dawn, on Friday, October 13th, 1307, one of the most powerful armies in Europe vanished almost overnight. Doors were smashed open. Knights were dragged from their beds. Men who had guarded kings, carried royal treasure, and fought in the name of God were suddenly called heretics. Some were tortured. Some confessed to crimes they may never have committed. And their last Grand Master would die in flames, leaving behind a curse that terrified a king. But the darkest question is not why the Knights Templar fell. The darkest question is this: how did a small brotherhood of poor knights become so powerful that even kings wanted them destroyed? Across the Kingdom of France, sealed orders were opened. Soldiers moved through the streets before sunrise. They did not come for rebels. They did not come for invaders. They came for the Knights Templar. The men they arrested were not ordinary soldiers. They were holy warriors, monks with swords, warriors who had sworn vows of poverty, obedience, and chastity, men who had once been celebrated as defenders of Christianity. But now, they were treated like criminals. Their houses were searched. Their money was seized. Their leaders were chained. And soon, the accusations began. Heresy, blasphemy, secret rituals, worship of strange idols, betrayal of the faith they had sworn to protect. The charges were horrifying, but the truth was far more complicated. Because the Templars had not fallen because they were weak. They fell because they had become too powerful, too rich, too independent, too dangerous to kings who owed them money. To understand how this happened, we must go back almost 200 years. Back to a world of blood, pilgrimage, faith, fear, and empire. Back to Jerusalem. Before the Templars became legends, they were only a small brotherhood of knights, and they claimed they wanted to protect the road. In the late 11th century, Europe was a violent and divided place. Kings fought kings. Nobles fought neighbors. Castles rose over villages like stone fists. The church held enormous spiritual power. And for many Christians, the holiest dream on earth was to reach Jerusalem. Jerusalem was not just a city. It was memory. It was prophecy. It was the place where heaven and earth seemed to touch. For Christians, it was the city of Christ's passion and resurrection. For Muslims, it was one of the sacred cities of Islam. For Jews, it was the ancient heart of their faith. For centuries, empires had fought over it. And in 1095, the struggle entered a new and brutal chapter. Pope Urban II called for armed pilgrimage. What followed became known as the First Crusade. Thousands marched east. Nobles, knights, peasants, priests, adventurers, criminals, and true believers. Some went for faith. Some went for land. Some went for glory. Some went because the world around them promised salvation through violence. And when the Crusaders reached Jerusalem in 1099, they captured the city in a storm of blood. The victory was celebrated in Europe. But in the East, it created a fragile new Christian kingdom surrounded by powerful enemies. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was born. But it was not safe. Not even close. Pilgrims still came from Europe. They crossed seas. They walked through deserts. They moved through dangerous roads where bandits, raiders, and hunger waited. Many arrived with nothing but prayer. Some never arrived at all. The dream of Jerusalem had been won. But the road to Jerusalem was still a nightmare. And that is where the story of the Templars begins. Around the year 1119, a small group of knights gathered in Jerusalem. Their leader was a French nobleman named Hugh de Payens. They made a vow. They would protect Christian pilgrims traveling through the Holy Land. They would live like monks. They would fight like soldiers. They would own nothing personally. They would obey their master. They would defend the faith with steel. At first, they were poor. So poor that one of their most famous symbols later showed two knights riding one horse. A sign of humility. A sign of brotherhood. A sign that these warriors were not supposed to live for wealth. But history has a strange sense of irony. Because the order that began in poverty would become one of the richest institutions in Europe. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem gave them a place to live. Their headquarters stood near the Temple Mount. In the Christian imagination of the time, this place was connected with the ancient Temple of Solomon. Because of this, the knights became known as the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. But history would remember them by a shorter name. The Knights Templar. The name sounded holy, but the idea was revolutionary. A monk was supposed to pray. A knight was supposed to fight. The Templars did both. They were a contradiction in armor. Men of silence and blood. men of prayer and war, men who slept under religious rules, then rode into battle with swords in their hands. And in the 12th century, this made them something new, something terrifying, something useful. The Christian states in the Holy Land needed warriors who would not easily leave. Ordinary crusaders often came, fought, fulfilled their vows, and returned home. But the Templars were permanent. They were not temporary pilgrims. They were a standing military force, trained, disciplined, religious, international, loyal not to one king, but to their order and to the Pope. That last detail would become very important, because a soldier who serves a king can be controlled by a king. But a soldier who answers only to the Pope stands outside the normal rules of power. And slowly, the Templars began to rise. In 1129, the order received formal recognition at the Council of Troyes. This changed everything. The Templars were no longer just a small brotherhood of knights in Jerusalem. They were now approved by the Church. Their mission had holy authority. Their reputation spread across Europe. And one of the most influential religious voices of the age, Bernard of Clairvaux, helped defend and promote them. Bernard did not describe them as ordinary warriors. He described them as a new kind of knighthood, not fighting for vanity, not fighting for land, but fighting for God. To many people in medieval Europe, this idea was powerful. It gave violence a sacred purpose. It turned the battlefield into a place of salvation. And young nobles listened. Donations began to pour in. Land, gold, horses, castles, farms, mills, vineyards, entire estates. Wealthy men gave to the Templars because they believed it helped their souls. Dying nobles left property to the order. Kings granted privileges. Popes gave them special protections. They could move across borders. They could collect donations. They could build churches and fortresses. They were often exempt from local taxes. And with every gift, the poor knights became less poor. But their true strength was not just money. It was organization. The Templars built a network. From the castles of the Holy Land to the villages of France. From England to Spain. From Italy to Cyprus. From ports to farms to fortified commanderies. They were everywhere. A man could give money to the Templars in Paris. That money could support a fortress in Syria. A noble could deposit treasure in London. The order could help move value across Europe without physically carrying all the gold. Slowly, almost accidentally, the Templars became more than warriors. They became bankers. And this made them even more powerful. Imagine a medieval pilgrim preparing to travel to Jerusalem. The journey was long. The roads were dangerous. Carrying gold could get a man robbed or killed. But the Templars had houses across Europe and the East. A traveler could deposit money with them in one place and receive credit in another. This was not modern banking as we know it, but it was one of the roots of international finance. And it gave the Templars something armies alone could not provide: trust. Kings trusted them with treasure. Nobles trusted them with estates. Pilgrims trusted them with money. The Church trusted them with war. And for a time, Europe saw them as nearly untouchable. But power always creates shadows. The stronger the Templars became, the more questions followed them. Why did a religious order need so much wealth? Why did men sworn to poverty control so many castles? Why did they answer to the Pope and not to kings? What happened inside their initiation ceremonies? What secrets did they keep? The Templars lived behind closed doors. Their ceremonies were private. Their discipline was strict. Their loyalty was intense. To outsiders, secrecy creates imagination, and imagination creates fear. In truth, many religious orders had private rituals. Medieval institutions often had ceremonies, rules, symbols, and vows. But the Templars were different because they were armed. A secretive monk might be strange. A secretive monk with a sword was dangerous. Still, for more than a century, the Templars were needed. In the Holy Land, they became one of the most elite fighting forces of the Crusader states. Their knights were expected to be brave to the point of death. Retreat was restricted. Discipline was severe. A Templar did not simply charge for personal glory. He fought as part of an order, a machine, a brotherhood. On the battlefield, their white mantles marked them out. The red cross on their chest became one of the most feared symbols of the Crusades. But the Holy Land was not a story of simple heroes and villains. It was a world of shifting alliances, brutal sieges, religious passion, diplomacy, betrayal, courage, cruelty, and survival. Muslim rulers fought Christian rulers. Christian rulers fought each other. Crusader states depended on trade with the very enemies they preached against. And in this unstable world, the Templars became both shield and sword. They guarded roads. They defended castles. They joined campaigns. They advised rulers. They negotiated. They killed. They died. Their legend grew in victory. But legends are tested in defeat. And the greatest test came with the rise of a leader whose name still echoes through medieval history. Saladin. By the late 12th century, the Muslim world around the Crusader states had begun to unite under powerful leadership. Saladin was patient, strategic, and deeply aware of the fractured Christian kingdoms. He did not simply fight with force. He understood timing. And in 1187, the Crusader army marched into disaster. The Battle of Hattin became one of the most devastating defeats in Crusader history. The Crusader army was exhausted, thirsty, surrounded, broken by heat, pressure, and poor decisions. The true cross, one of the most sacred relics of the Crusader world, was captured. Many knights were killed or taken prisoner. And after Hattin, Jerusalem itself fell to Saladin. The city that had inspired the Crusades was lost. The shock in Europe was enormous. The dream had cracked. The Templars survived. But the world they had been created to defend was beginning to collapse. Still, they did not disappear. They adapted. They moved. They continued fighting. They held fortresses. They remained wealthy. They remained influential. But each defeat in the East changed how people saw them in the West. If the Templars were holy warriors, why was the Holy Land being lost? If they were chosen defenders, why could they not save Jerusalem? If so much money had been given to them, where had it gone? These questions did not destroy them immediately, but they planted seeds. And seeds of doubt grow slowly. Over the next century, crusading efforts continued. Armies came and went. Kings took the cross. Popes preached new campaigns. Fortresses changed hands. Treaties were made and broken. But the direction of history was becoming clear. The Crusader states were shrinking. The dream of permanent Christian rule in Jerusalem was slipping away. Then, in 1291, the city of Acre fell. Acre was one of the last great Crusader strongholds in the Holy Land. Its fall was not just a military defeat. It was the end of an age. The Templars fought in the defense. Many died. Survivors escaped by sea. The order moved its main base to Cyprus. But something had changed forever. Without the Holy Land, what were the Templars for? This was the question that haunted them. They still had wealth. They still had land. They still had ships. They still had military experience. They still had privileges. But their original purpose had been broken. And when an institution keeps its wealth after losing its mission, enemies begin to gather. Some called for reform. Some suggested merging the Templars with their rivals, the Hospitallers. Some wondered whether military orders had become too independent. And kings looked at Templar wealth with hungry eyes. Especially one king, Philip IV of France. Philip was known as Philip the Fair. But fairness was not what made him dangerous. He was cold, ambitious, determined to strengthen royal power. He wanted a France ruled by the crown, not by independent nobles, foreign bankers, or untouchable religious orders. He fought with the papacy. He taxed clergy. He expelled Jews from France and seized their property. He attacked groups when it served the needs of the crown. And he had a problem that many kings have had throughout history. He needed money. War was expensive. Government was expensive. Power was expensive. And Philip owed money. The Templars were among the great financial powers of his world. They had served as royal treasurers. They had handled money for kings. They had wealth Philip could not easily control. And worst of all, they were not fully under his authority. They answered to the Pope. That made them useful, but it also made them threatening. Philip had already shown he was willing to challenge spiritual power. His conflict with Pope Boniface VIII had shaken Europe. After Boniface died, the papacy entered a period of weakness and pressure. A French pope, Clement V, eventually came to power. Clement was not simply Philip's puppet. History is rarely that simple. But Philip had influence and pressure, and a king with debts can become very creative in finding enemies. Around this time, rumors about the Templars began to spread. Some came from former members. Some came from enemies. Some may have grown from misunderstood rituals. Some may have been deliberately shaped for political use. The accusations were explosive. They claimed that during secret initiation ceremonies, Templars denied Christ. They claimed that recruits spat on the cross. They claimed there were obscene kisses. They claimed the order worshipped a mysterious idol. They claimed corruption, blasphemy, and moral decay. To modern ears, these accusations sound like a storm of medieval fear. But in the 14th century, they were deadly. Heresy was not just a religious crime. It was a threat to the entire social order. A man accused of heresy could lose his freedom, his property, his reputation, his life. An entire order accused of heresy could be destroyed. Philip understood this, and he moved with terrifying precision. The arrest orders were prepared in secret. They were sealed. Officials across France were instructed not to open them until the appointed moment. Then, on Friday, October 13th, 1307, the trap closed. Templars across France were arrested. Among them was the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay. De Molay had spent years trying to defend the future of the order. He had supported plans for a new crusade. He had resisted certain reforms. He believed the Templars still had a mission. But now, he was not standing before an army. He was standing before interrogators. The king's men moved quickly. They seized Templar property. They controlled the narrative. Public accusations spread. The Templars were not just arrested. They were humiliated. They were turned from holy warriors into monsters in the public imagination. And then came the confessions. But confessions under torture are dangerous things. They reveal pain. They reveal fear. They reveal what a person will say when the body can no longer endure. They do not always reveal truth. Many Templars confessed. Some admitted to denying Christ. Some admitted to spitting on the cross. Some repeated the accusations demanded of them. But later, many recanted. They said the confessions were false. They said they had spoken under torture. They said they had been broken. And that created a problem. Because if they confessed, the king could say they were guilty. But if they recanted, the church had to investigate. Pope Clement V was placed in a difficult position. The Templars were a papal order. Philip had acted with shocking force. If Clement defended the Templars too strongly, he risked a confrontation with the King of France. If he abandoned them, he allowed a king to destroy a major religious order. The result was years of trials, pressure, confusion, and fear. Across Europe, Templars were questioned. In some places, they were treated less brutally than in France. In other places, pressure mounted. The accusations traveled farther than the evidence, and the reputation of the order began to collapse. This is one of the most chilling parts of the story. The Templars had spent nearly 200 years building trust. Trust with kings, trust with pilgrims, trust with popes, trust with donors. But trust can be destroyed faster than it is built. A whisper can become a rumor. A rumor can become a charge. A charge can become a confession. A confession can become a death sentence. And once the public begins to believe a secret order is evil, innocence becomes almost impossible to prove. The Templars were trapped by the very secrecy that had once protected them. Their private rituals now looked suspicious. Their wealth now looked corrupt. Their independence now looked rebellious. Their silence now looked guilty. And their enemies knew it. In 1310, dozens of Templars in France were burned at the stake after defending the order. Imagine the message this sent. Speak against the accusations, and you may burn. Confess, and you may live. But even survival came with shame. By 1312, the pressure had become too great. At the Council of Vienne, Pope Clement V dissolved the Knights Templar. The order was not officially declared guilty in the strongest possible way, but it was ended. Its property was supposed to be transferred mostly to the Hospitallers. In practice, kings and rulers found ways to take portions, delay transfers, or benefit from the collapse. The Templars as an institution were gone. The secret army had been dismantled. But Jacques de Molay was still alive, and his final act would turn the fall of the Templars into legend. For years, de Molay had been imprisoned. He had confessed under pressure, but in 1314, he was brought out publicly in Paris. The authorities expected him to repeat his confession, to accept guilt, to disappear into history as the fallen leader of a disgraced order. But de Molay did something dangerous. He recanted. He declared that the order was innocent. He said the accusations were false. He chose death over a lie. For this, he was condemned as a relapsed heretic. And the punishment was fire. Jacques de Molay was burned on an island in the Seine. As the flames rose, witnesses said he faced death with courage. Then came the legend. The legend says that de Molay cursed King Philip IV and Pope Clement V. He called them to meet him before God within a year. Whether he truly said these words is uncertain. History cannot prove the curse as fact, but what happened next made people believe. Pope Clement V died within months. King Philip IV died before the year was over. To medieval minds, this did not feel like coincidence. It felt like judgment. And from that moment, the Templars passed from history into myth. Their order was destroyed. Their leaders were dead. Their properties were scattered. But their mystery survived. People began to ask questions. What happened to their treasure? Did some Templars escape? Did they hide sacred relics? Did they possess secrets from the Temple Mount? Did their knowledge pass into hidden societies? Were they innocent victims? Or had they truly hidden something from the world? The truth is difficult. The Templars did have treasure, but not always in the way legends imagine. Their wealth was spread across lands, buildings, livestock, agricultural income, debts, records, and rights. It was not necessarily one mountain of gold hidden beneath a castle. Some treasure was seized. Some was transferred. Some may have disappeared in the chaos. But legends prefer a locked vault to an accounting book. And so, over the centuries, the lost treasure of the Templars became one of history's most enduring mysteries. Some stories claim Templar ships escaped from France. Some claim they sailed to Scotland. Some connect them to Rosslyn Chapel. Some connect them to the Freemasons. Some connect them to the Holy Grail. Some even imagine secret bloodlines, hidden maps, or ancient relics. These stories are powerful, but many are built more on imagination than evidence. The real Templar story does not need fake secrets to be fascinating, because the truth is already dramatic enough. A small band of knights rose from the chaos of the Crusades. They became holy warriors, then landlords, then bankers, then international power brokers. They built a network that crossed borders in an age when most people never left their village. They answered to the Pope in a world ruled by kings. They controlled wealth in a world hungry for money. They lived behind closed doors in a world terrified of heresy. And when their original mission collapsed, their power became harder to justify. That was the real danger. Not a secret idol. Not a hidden code. Not a treasure buried under stone. The real danger was independence. The Templars had become a state within states. A financial system without a kingdom. An army without a country. A religious order with military force. And in medieval Europe, no king could feel safe beside a power he did not fully control. Philip IV did not simply destroy the Templars because he believed every rumor. He destroyed them because the rumors gave him a weapon. The accusations gave him moral permission. The trials gave him legal cover. The confessions gave him public justification. And the order's wealth gave him motive. This is why the fall of the Templars still matters. It shows how quickly power can change meaning. Yesterday's heroes can become today's traitors. Yesterday's defenders can become today's threat. Yesterday's sacred symbol can become evidence in a trial. The same Red Cross that once inspired donations later marked men for suspicion. The same secrecy that once created unity later created fear. The same wealth that once funded war later attracted destruction. History often remembers the Templars as mysterious. But perhaps the deeper lesson is political. No institution becomes powerful without making enemies. And no enemy is more dangerous than a king who needs money and has found a moral excuse. Still, we should not turn the Templars into perfect heroes. They were part of the Crusades, a violent age of conquest, religious war, and suffering. Their swords were not symbols of peace. Their battles left real bodies behind. Their world was not romantic for those caught beneath it. But we should also be careful not to accept every accusation created by their enemies. The truth sits in the middle. They were not saints without blood on their hands. But they were not the monsters Philip's propaganda needed them to be. They were men of their time. Brave, violent, disciplined, ambitious, devout, flawed, and trapped inside a system where faith and power were impossible to separate. Their rise began with a simple promise: protect the pilgrims. Their fall came when that promise was buried beneath wealth, politics, suspicion, and royal debt. And by the time they realized the crown had turned against them, it was already too late. Picture the final years of the order. A Templar knight sits in a cold cell. He once rode beneath the sun of the Holy Land. He once heard horses scream in battle. He once believed his order would last until the end of time. Now he hears footsteps outside the door. He does not know if the men coming for him bring questions, torture, or death. He has seen brothers confess. He has seen brothers recant. He has seen smoke rise from the place where men were burned. He knows the world outside has already decided what he is. Not a knight, not a monk, not a defender, a heretic. This is how institutions die. Not always in one battle. Not always with one defeat. Sometimes they die through documents, through rumors, through trials, through fear, through the slow replacement of memory. The Templars had survived Muslim armies. They had survived the loss of Jerusalem. They had survived the fall of Acre. They had survived war, hunger, and exile. But they could not survive the King of France. Because Philip did not fight them on a battlefield. He fought them in the court of public belief. And that battlefield was far more dangerous. Once an accusation enters the mind of a crowd, it does not need proof to become powerful. Once fear becomes official, cruelty becomes procedure. Once the state decides a group must disappear, the law can be shaped around the sentence. The Templars learned this too late. But their story did not end with their destruction. In Portugal, the order's legacy transformed into the Order of Christ. In other places, former Templar property passed into new hands. Some knights entered other religious orders. Some lived quietly. Some disappeared from the record. And some became ghosts in the imagination of Europe. Over time, the Templars became whatever later generations needed them to be. To some, they were martyrs. To others, villains. To novelists, guardians of secrets. To conspiracy theorists, hidden masters of history. To historians, they are something more human and more interesting. They are proof that power is never just military. Power can be spiritual, financial, symbolic, administrative. The Templars had all of it. They had the sword. They had the cross. They had the treasury. They had the network. And for a while, that made them unstoppable. Until it made them unforgivable. That is the tragedy at the heart of their story. The very things that made the Templars strong also made them vulnerable. Their discipline made them feared. Their secrecy made them suspicious. Their wealth made them targeted. Their independence made them politically dangerous. Their holiness made accusations against them even more shocking. And their fall became a warning whispered through history. Do not become too useful to kings. Do not become too rich while preaching poverty. Do not become too powerful without a throne. And never believe that yesterday's protection will save you from tomorrow's ambition. The Knights Templar began as guardians of the road. They ended as prisoners of the state. They began with vows of poverty. They ended surrounded by treasure, debt, and suspicion. They began as defenders of pilgrims. They ended as legends of hidden knowledge and lost gold. But perhaps the most haunting image is not a castle, not a battlefield, not a treasure chamber. It is an old man in flames. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, standing before death. The order behind him destroyed. His brothers scattered. His name blackened by accusations. His body condemned. And yet, in that final moment, he took back his confession. He chose the fire. Not because it would save the Templars. It was too late for that. But because sometimes the final battle is not fought to win. Sometimes it is fought so history hears one last truth. The flames consumed him. The king continued his rule. The Pope was gone within months. Philip followed before the year ended. And the legend of the curse began. Was it divine judgment? Was it coincidence? Was it the medieval mind giving meaning to political murder? We cannot know, but we do know this. The king destroyed the Templars to erase a threat. Instead, he created a mystery that survived him for 7 centuries. The Templars lost their castles. They lost their wealth. They lost their order. But they won something no king could seize. They became immortal in memory. And maybe that is why their story still holds us. Because it is not only a story about knights. It is a story about what happens when faith becomes power, when power becomes wealth, when wealth becomes fear, and when fear becomes destruction. The Knights Templar were born on the dangerous roads to Jerusalem. They rose beneath the Red Cross. They became the bankers of kings. They guarded secrets, money, castles, and dreams of holy war. Then, in one dawn raid, the most famous military order in Christendom was broken. History remembers their mystery, but it should also remember the warning. No army is more dangerous than one that answers to a higher power. No bank is more dangerous than one trusted by kings. And no brotherhood is more vulnerable than one whose secrets can be turned against it. The Templars became too powerful to ignore, too wealthy to leave alone, too independent to control. So the world that created them destroyed them. And in the smoke of their ending, a legend was born. The secret army was gone. But the question remained. Were the Knights Templar victims of greed? Or had they truly become too powerful for the world that made them?